The House of Grey, a podcast-only novel written by Collin Earl, read by Christopher Snellgrove. For more information about the book, please visit houseofgreybook.com. Music for The House of Grey provided by Figure of Fiends. Visit the band at myspace.com/Figure of Fiends. Cover art by James Thane. More information at THAYN.net.
Hi y'all, this is Chris Snellgrove. So, you made it through the prologue and are back for more? What did happen to that man in the funny coat? In episode 2, we begin our hero's story as he starts a new chapter in his life. Oh, by the way, thanks for all the feedback. Remember, head over to houseofgreybook.com after the episode and write us a review. And now, Chapter 1.
Monson. Monson thought he heard a strangely distant voice.
Wake up, darling. We're almost there.
Huh? The young Monson Grey could not really hear at the time, as he had a large amount of blankets on top of him. He tried to shake himself into coherence, but was having little success. He was warm and comfortable, and for that moment in time, was perfectly content to remain hidden. He felt that maybe, just maybe, if he stayed under these blankets long enough, he might be able to—
Monson Grey, I am talking to you.
Oh, sorry, Molly. Monson popped his head out of the blankets. I just woke up. Cut me some slack, all right? A chubby, but unbelievably cute woman with brown curly hair looked up in the rearview mirror and smiled. Then, turning her eyes back onto the road, nervous? It was more statement than question, but she still probably expected him to answer. No, not really. It's just school. It was a downright lie. Collin University was one of the best private high schools in the country, known not only for its faculty and curriculum, but also for its competitive nature. Unlike some of the other private schools, Collin was involved in all aspects of a student's life, academic and otherwise. Its highly competitive nature was not something that could just be dismissed. Granted, this was a rich kid's school, so of course there was a double standard. It was true that you could get thrown out if your grades were not high enough, but only if you did not have the right parents.
Well?
Monson grimaced. Molly, don't get so excited. It's just a trial, remember? She looked up into the rearview mirror again and smiled at him. Monson, honey, you are going to be just fine. These are your kind of people. He did not like the sound of that. What was his kind of people?
You worry too much.
Her eyes returned to the road. The story that had brought Monson to such a foreign place was indeed an odd one. He still did not really understand it himself. Collin and its dean were receiving some bad publicity in the last few years. Complaints of discrimination and harassment were widespread in the gossip columns all over Washington state, and even as far south as California. Not to mention the reports of hazing and intimidation by a secret society created by the rich boys at the school, the ones not on scholarship. Secret society, Monson thought. What a joke. He had a mental replay of a silly movie he watched while in the hospital about a poor kid on scholarship to an uppity school and a secret society out to get him. Monson laughed silently to himself. If the society was real, it was probably no more than rich boys trying to impress each other with the size of their— Monson, are you deaf? Oh, sorry, Molly. I was daydreaming again. She smiled. I can't believe that we're finally here. How can you not be excited? Of course I'm not excited. I'm still recovering, and I still can't remember how I even got into this school, let alone how on earth I'm going to afford it. Scholarship or not. But even more annoying than that, a certain someone won't tell me anything. He glared at her indignantly. Give it some time, Monson dear. Molly flashed her biggest, cheesiest smile. You know what the doctor said. Don't push yourself. You need to get used to this pace again. Monson sighed. It was the same thing since the day he woke up over 3 months ago in the hospital, covered in bandages and scars. No one would tell him how he got there and what had happened to him. Don't think about that, Monson told himself as his thoughts strayed. Focus on getting through today. He turned back and looked out the window. A vast forest was all that could be seen as they drove leisurely through the Washington state countryside. Off in the distance, he could see 2 chiseled mountaintops that were so abrupt in their location that he could have sworn that they were not there a moment ago. From Molly's various ranting over the last month, he knew that these peaks, known as the Twin Towers, marked the entrance of Corrin's property. It was an odd place for a school, especially a very wealthy one like Collin. The plateau, besides being totally random in its geographical location, was in the middle of the only temperate rainforest in the world. This made Collin a very secluded and wet place to go to school. On the upside, however, it gave the occupants a great deal of privacy, allowing otherwise public figures a certain degree of freedom from the public eye. Many rumors circulated about the school, but whether it was on the internet or in the papers, there was just not much known about the place. The town was a good example of this. Rumor said that everything in the town and those who lived in it revolved around the school. To live and work there was a huge privilege, and that the background checks rivaled most government agencies. There was even talk of a specially trained security force due to the large number of potential kidnap victims. So, if he really thought about it, it made perfect sense to have the school located here. It was a highly controllable area with a low chance of security problems. Despite this, Monson could not help feeling depressed at the fact that it was in the middle of nowhere. If he did have a problem, there was not a lot he could do about it now. He gave a deep sigh and refocused his thoughts back to gazing out the window. He watched a few other cars slide graciously past them as a nagging feeling of annoyance and doubt started to claw at him. He did his best to ignore it and just enjoy the scenery. The rare Washington state sun lit up the surrounding area, making it appear alive and vibrant. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth on his face. In spite of himself, he smiled. Don't worry, not just yet, cooed a voice in the back of his head. There will be plenty of time for worry later. The drive through Towers Pass was not a pleasant one for him. Visions of moving walls and dark spaces flashed through his head as he did his best not to hyperventilate. Some of it was a result from his overactive imagination, and some from Molly's crazy driving. When they emerged on the other side of the pass, she broke out in girlish laughter while he let out a breath to release the tension. Wow! A sun-splattered cluster of buildings appeared prominently on the horizon. Have you ever seen anything so lovely? I swear, you're such a little kid sometimes. Monson laughed as he adjusted himself to get a better look. It's just a school. Nothing to get too worked up about. Just a school? I will have you know. I know. No need to bring that up. I get it. It isn't just a school. He would have been very proud of you, you know. Monson paused, taken aback. Molly, I really don't want to. I know. They proceeded along the highway for at least another hour. With a great deal of moving and stamping, Monson adjusted his blanket so he could see properly. He now could see clearly out the back and side windows, giving him an opportunity to examine Corrin Valley in its entirety. This valley, like the school, was also an interesting anomaly. On a raised plateau, the valley's lowest elevation was well above the surrounding areas, but was called a valley because of the 4 tower-like peaks that surrounded the relatively flat center. These peaks were not to be confused with the Twin Towers. No, these were far larger in comparison. The 4 lords, as they were called, were almost like walls to a castle, guarding the valley within and acting as a beacon to any who would dare oppose the castle's lords. There was a downside to this castle-like geological structure. There was only one real way out of the valley, and conversely, only one way in. Although there were rumors that there was a helicopter pad somewhere on the premises. Something about this idea bothered him a great deal. He did not like the idea of being boxed in. Eventually, the pass folded smoothly into a road built out of a brick, similar to what the Romans used when their empire was at the height of its power. They were still far from the limits of the town, however. The trip felt endless. They just seemed to keep driving on and on, meandering sluggishly through the never-ending foothills. Monson did not mind too much. It gave him time to think and the chance to enjoy being outside, both activities that he rather enjoyed. Opportunities for either had been scarce in the months of recovery. He still wasn't sure how he felt about going to Collin anyway. Molly had done some fast talking to convince him that despite the past, coming here was the best thing for him. He had thought long and hard on the subject. Considering the ramifications and the current state of affairs, it probably would have been easier to just go to a public school, seeing as he had the social skills of a piece of wood, and his current appearance would probably scare people. It scared him, too. Long nights of practice conversations convinced Monson that going to the school was a bad idea. There was also all sorts of questions that would probably be shot his way once everyone found out, and 20 questions was definitely not on his to-do list. However, he told Monson to come here. It was important to him. So here Monson came, even if it did make him feel uneasy. At least there was plenty to take his mind off his troubles. Huge trees, dozens of feet tall and yards in diameter, littered the roadway, as deer, antelope, and even an occasional bear continued on with their daily activities, taking little notice of the intruders. The 2-lane brick road widened as they came into the town proper. This entrance was marked by a huge granite relief off to the side of the road, where the words Collin Valley, home of the Collin University Legionnaires, sat affixed to the rock. These words were made in a lighter, polished stone than its darker backdrop. The two stones created a very nice contrast. Past this huge signpost, large and grandiose homes lined the road with impressive efficiency that was probably lost on most people, but not on Monson, who appreciated such craftsmanship. Everything in this city's layout seemed expertly planned and perfectly executed, though maybe a little too perfect for his taste. Despite all these many marvels, he continued to feel uneasy. He knew in an instant the cause. He turned towards Molly. "Hey, Molly? Yes, dear? There are people who live in this town, right?" She laughed. He decided not to tell her he was completely serious. Where were all the people? Surely they should have seen someone by now. He had yet to see a single person. Annoyed, he again turned his observations to the town's points of interest. At least, that's what the Garmin called them. The town was much bigger than it initially appeared. There were many restaurants, a movie theater, and plenty of window shopping. Molly started to visibly shake when these shops came into view. Monson teased her, starting to mimic her movements. "You and your shopping fixation. You should really get that checked. It can't be healthy." She scowled back at him. "Oh, you hush." "Okay, but seriously, how could you bring me to a place like this?" He switched gears. "This place makes Beverly Hills look like Compton. This was a bad idea." "Don't be so dramatic." She glanced out the back window. "It's not that ritzy." Ritzy? That didn't even begin to cover it. Ritzy sounded like some bad cover band. This place was terribly, ridiculously rich. Whether it was the roads, houses, or shops, this place had money, and lots of it. It was as if the very foundation of the city was built on a pile of gold. He shuddered. What a horrible image. People did start to emerge from shops and stores as the morning dragged on. Why did it seem to be taking so long to get there? It was as if God was playing a joke on him, turning back the clock just to mock him. He laughed to himself this time. God, playing a joke on me. Well, it wouldn't be the first time. Monson chanced a glance at his own reflection in the window. A joke. On me. He brushed his hair out of his eyes. Nope. Not the first time. Finally, after what seemed like a lifetime, Molly turned the minivan from Main Street onto University Drive. Here, a gigantic arch with the words Collin University carved into it sat as a beacon for all those who passed into the school. He groaned inwardly as reality and realization gripped him at the same time. They had arrived at Collin University. The school had a very East Coast, Ivy League feel to it. It was an ideal taken to such extremes that even the parking lot screamed old-school refinement. The entire compound, including the grounds, was encased by a brick wall that was spattered with a thick layer of vines and a creeping flower that he did not recognize. He again felt annoyed. This school, just like the valley, left him with the impression that he was entering a fortress or something. He half expected to see battlements and other medieval-type fortifications. He scanned the wall, looking for, well, he did not know exactly what he was looking for. Looking for possible escape routes? It did not hurt to be prepared. Yes, that was it, finding the best exit in case of an emergency. It was an odd habit, yes, he understood that, but it was his habit, one he could clearly remember, even without the aid of his journals. He was grateful for it, even if it was a little weird. The visitor parking was on the far side of the main entry, and almost totally enclosed by the same type of wall that bordered the homes in the town. As they entered the actual campus, the road split into sections, one part continuing to run parallel to the large brick wall, as the other portion curved out of view. In front of the wall, sitting on large granite blocks, were statues of Roman icons spaced evenly every few dozen feet. The sculptures were very conspicuous and were emphasized by the several small spotlights placed around their bases. The instantly noticeable craftsmanship that adorned these works of art gave the distinct feeling of purpose. Their purpose felt like the easy part. Collin erected these works of art to impress the observer. He amused himself for a moment, trying to guess which physical representation went with the various Roman deities, until something else caught his eye, something that could not be correct. Hey, Molly, this school's supposed to have an ancient Roman theme, isn't it? Yes, Monson dear. Why do you ask? Monson answered her question with one of his own. So, if the theme is Roman, then why do all the statues have their inscriptions in Greek? I have no idea. Is that wrong? She paused as she passed the next statue, looking at it, and then did a double take, this time looking at him, as if she suddenly remembered something important. Speaking excitedly, she was barely able to stammer out, Did you just remember something? You must have. Oh, how exciting! Calm down, calm down. Monson interrupted her before she could get too excited. It's nothing like that. I've been watching the History Channel for the past 2 months, remember? She looked disappointed. It made him feel bad. I'll let you know, okay? In the meantime, try not to get yourself too worked up. She nodded. After a few more minutes of driving, they reached an enormous iron gate where the road veered off in a circle, doubling back on itself. Molly pulled in behind a black Cadillac Escalade. She grabbed her purse. Now, where did I put that key card? Key card? Monson said curiously. Yes, a key card. Everything here is coded, Molly said absent-mindedly. Coded? We are not going to get a lot done if you keep repeating everything I say. Yes, coded. You're going to need your card for everything here. That sucks. He thought about the restrictions that would probably come with that. Why would they do that? Molly started to reply, but as she did, the Escalade in front of them pulled forward. We're up. She stopped herself mid-word and pulled into the now vacant space. She rolled down the window and scooted up as close as she could to the large display screen.
Welcome to Collin University,
said a slightly stiff voice, with a robotic hint to it.
Insert key card identification, please.
Molly pulled out a small, white envelope, opened it, and retrieved a blue key card from the inside. Now shaking with excitement, she placed it in the computer slot. Monson watched her as a rare feeling of affection welled up inside him. You could not help but love someone like Molly. She was passionate and fun, and while she did not act like it, she was incredibly smart. She was always there for him, even from the start. Ever since it happened. He regarded her as family. It was not difficult. She was the only person left resembling family. Molly's presence in this particular venture was extra fortunate, as she just happened to be considerably more excited about Collin than he was. She was so enthusiastic about the school that she burned up many hours of valuable free time in the pursuit of information concerning it. She read up on Monson's scholarship, the school itself, and the history of the area, and even some of the possible students who would attend there. He thought it wouldn't be a stretch to wager on her knowing as much or more about the school than some of the newer faculty members. This was even with the seemingly impenetrable shadow that hid the school from the public view. Molly could be a scary woman when she wanted to be. Big, bold letters appeared on the screen at the same time the computer chimed,
Welcome, Mr. Grey, Horum Veer. Welcome to university.
What the hell did it just say? Monson said, drowning out the rest of the computer's greeting and raising an eyebrow. Don't swear, dear. She tried to listen to the rest of the message. Finally convinced that there was not any more to be heard, she started to pull forward. I think we go this way. You didn't answer my question. He looked around as they entered the parking lot. I know. She glanced around, presumably looking for a parking spot. He gritted his teeth. He hated it when she did that. She had a good knack of ignoring whatever she deemed unimportant. It took a while before they were able to find decent parking, due to the considerable number of kids and parents bustling around trying to gather up school stuff and hugging one another. The student population was exceptionally diverse, with every race, sex, and ethnicity conceivable. It just goes to show that money talks no matter what you look like or what language you speak. This being the case, the biggest and most noteworthy division among the different students appeared to be socioeconomic status. He came to this conclusion from simple observation. Many of the students were arriving in style. Stretch limousines in every color littered the visitors' parking lot, followed by other cars filled with maids and butlers, as diverse as the students themselves. Other expensive modes of transportation were also rampant. He confirmed the truth of the rumored helipad and even what looked like a private jetway. He was relieved, just a bit, at seeing many people like him. These were not the ultra-rich. These people were simple, clean-cut folks, with normal-looking families and friends, coming to see them off as they started on a path towards a hopeful future. This was a very good school, after all. They should be hopeful. He looked again. There were more scholarship students than he originally expected. That made him very happy somehow. He continued to observe the different students and their families, curious as to how the different classes would interact. He could not help but notice that there was a large number of very good-looking girls dispersed amongst the crowd. Being homeschooled in a rural area, Monson did not have much interaction with the opposite sex, although his memory was not what it once was. Molly made this clear during one of their late-night discussions. He took her at her word. He wondered what it was going to be like being around this many people, this many girls. As if she was listening to his thoughts, right on cue, she pointed across the parking lot. "Oh, Monson, honey, look at her," he gasped. "Molly." He tried to grab her arm. "Don't point. I have to go to school with these people." "Fine, but look anyway." He turned to where Molly was just pointing. A girl stood, talking animatedly with a large group of people. Oddly enough, the girl was the only one that looked school age. He wondered for a moment who the others were. Monson could not think. His thoughts seemed to meld together. This girl proved to be quite the diversion. She was very pretty, with sheets of long golden hair pulled back in a kind of half ponytail. The style was messy, yet orderly in a way. Regardless, the look worked for her, as it framed her perfectly proportioned face with exquisite precision. Her dress was rigid and deliberate, boosting her social conservatism and attesting to the fact that not only did she have money, but she occupied a place in high society. Her hands never seemed to be out of place. She smiled at exactly the right moments. She moved and gestured with poise and refinement. She was a proper lady. Despite this appeal to modest precepts, and though the simplicity of her dark silken shirt and pure white blouse left much to the imagination, the flow of the material as it enveloped a soft and curvy figure caught the attention of more than one boy in the parking lot. She would have been even prettier if a nasty sneer was not entrenched into her features. "Oh, she's a cute one." Molly pulled into a parking space on the far side of the parking lot. "Is that a question or a statement?" He pulled open the door as the van rolled to a stop. Never mind. It doesn't have anything to do with me." "You stop that right now. I'm expecting you to be social at this school." She smiled encouragingly, despite sounding slightly worried. "They are going to love you. I mean, how could they not?" "Yeah, I wonder about that. How could they not love me?" "I'm sensing some sarcasm." Molly's eyes narrowed slightly. "I hope so. I'm laying it on pretty thick." She glared at him for a moment, though it was not very convincing. She looked like she was trying not to laugh. "Anyway, I'll be right back. Start unloading the van while I go and check on something?" She strolled toward a tower in the center of the parking lot. He thought he heard her say something in a breathy, excited voice as she walked away, but by the time he realized this and called after her to inquire what she said, she was long out of earshot. Grumbling, he put his efforts into lifting the gate of the minivan open, but stopped for a moment, noticing his own reflection. Long, dark, wavy hair hid a once handsome face, its reflection a mere taste of the horror the rest of his body knew, but his mind could not remember. Scars stretched across his face like a sadistic artist just finished his demented work. Soft gray eyes, a straight nose, and a rigid jawline made him look older than he was. It was one of the comments he constantly received. He pushed the hair out of his eyes. He needed a haircut, but was reluctant to do so, as his appearance scared most that made his acquaintance. So, he ignored his hair, hoping to reduce the effects of his face. He was not sure this worked. The hair may have just added to his already creepy appearance. He had experiences with such in the past. One night, while still in the hospital, he scared a new nurse out of her skin when he came up behind her in the early hours of the morning. The woman's right hook narrowly missed his left jaw. He actually had to pin her against the wall before she would listen to him. You aren't going to hurt me, are you?" He could still remember how her voice quivered with fear. "Hurt you? You're the one that tried to hit me." After 10 minutes of explanation, he let go of her. She stared at him. I'm sorry." The fear was still prevalent in her voice. I didn't realize who you were." "Yeah, I get that a lot." "You're the one, aren't you?" Her tone changed. "You're the one from Barty Bridge." "Yeah, that's the rumor, isn't it?" "What's your name?" He walked away from her. She called after him. "Wait, don't go. I didn't mean to offend." You didn't offend me." "Then why?" He turned to look at her. "I can't tell you what I don't remember." He never saw that nurse again. That was not a pleasant exchange, but that experience taught him a very valuable lesson. His past life, what he knew of it, was gone. Things were different now. He had to learn a life lesson, an important one that was better learned earlier rather than later. Monson could remember his name now, but in many ways he was like a clean slate with bits and pieces of himself trickling in from the edges on occasion. There was much he could not remember about his life, parts of himself that still felt lost. However, this was important to understand. He did not suffer from depression like many would expect. He did not know any different. He did not know what it was like to be treated kindly by strangers, so he did not bother worrying about it. Now, he worked with the situation that life presented to him, careful to notice if he was making anyone uncomfortable, but never backing down because of his appearance. A group of students passed his van. They looked older, probably upperclassmen. The gazes shifted over him as if he were part of the landscape until one of them, a portly girl with frumpy brown hair, stopped to mentally register what she was looking at. She grabbed her nearest companion and spun them towards Monson. They looked like they were going to be sick. He ignored them and switched his attention back to the tailgate as he moved mindlessly, his focus not really on what he was doing. "This is going to be an interesting experience, to say the least," he thought. His mind strayed to the blonde girl. He smiled to himself as he pulled out his bags and stacked them up so it would be easier to carry. He wondered idly what his teachers were like and what kind of friends he would make, assuming, of course, that he made any at all. He never had many friends living out in the country. Well, maybe he had lots of friends, but he could not remember them now. No one came to see him in the hospital, so he assumed that was the case. It was kind of a depressing thought. After a few minutes, he was able to get his luggage and various belongings from the different locations inside the van. It was absolutely amazing how much stuff could scatter within the limited space. Finally, the only thing left that was for sure not going back with Molly was a sort of long pouch that until then failed to catch his attention, having been cramped in the lower reaches of the back seat. He grabbed for the pouch as he felt the object inside. It was hard, heavy, and from what he could feel, even though the covering was making it difficult, very smooth. The object felt familiar. Excited, he pulled the drawstring to open the pouch and removed a highly polished stick. This was not what he had been expecting. The wood was smooth and extremely sturdy, which led him to believe it was probably made with some sort of dense wood, like cherry or elm. At first, he thought it was a cane or some forgotten decoration. At second glance, however, he saw that the stick had a slight curve to it. Around 3.5 feet long and about 2 inches in diameter, the stick had a handle that was a fraction thicker than the rest of the shaft. It ran straight up for a few inches, then started curving back slightly as it reached its tip. The wood was dark and surprisingly heavy, a lot heavier than it looked. He took the stick in his hands, holding it in a double-fisted grip in front of him. He swung it. It was like a sword or something. Fascinated, he began to search for some reason as to the existence of the wooden sword. As he did so, something very strange happened that seized his attention. A feeling of overwhelming triumph that was not his own seemed to wash over him, causing every fiber in his being to tense. Straining his ears, he heard a whoosh and footsteps directly behind him. Something in the back of his mind flashed, and he reacted instantly, raising the stick and flinging it over his shoulder, almost like a knight grabbing for a sword on his back. There was a smack as the wood made contact with some unknown object. His body reacted before he knew what was happening. He arched his back slightly and slid with a fluid-type grace, spinning to face his attacker. There was a boy now standing in front of him, holding a stick similar to the one in Monson's hand. He held it in a neutral position, with a thoroughly shocked look on his face. Monson gave him an appraising look, with a sense of shock that mirrored the boy's. He thought that this person could not be a student. He could hardly be considered an adolescent. He was too big, too well muscled, had too much facial hair. They continued to gape at each other, neither of them moving or saying a word. He was a rugged fellow, tall and muscled with short reddish blonde hair, very light green eyes, and a short, well-kept stubble. He wore nice clothing, a blue button-up with tan linen slacks pressed to perfection and accessorized by a gold watch that Monson was pretty sure was a Rolex. The highly polished stick in his hand drooped haphazardly to his side as a very dim-witted expression started to play across his hard features. He considered Monson for a moment, then said apologetically, sorry about that. Thought you were someone else." Monson could not help himself. He laughed, though the thoughts of what would have happened if he had not blocked the boy's attack pricked at him. The boy looked slightly embarrassed. Monson did not have the heart to tease him. He thought that he should break the tension. "That was a very solid blow." He gestured to the stick in the boy's hand. "So, what would have happened if I hadn't blocked it?" "It's probably better that you don't think about that." The boy looked at Monson as if he was just seeing him. Monson knew that he was taking in the whole of his appearance, scars and all. "You look like you got into a fight with a meat grinder and lost." Monson actually laughed at this. That was unexpected. "Well, at least I have an excuse, which is more than I can say for you." "Hey, what's that supposed to mean?" Monson's answer was lost to a loud voice that echoed behind the larger boy. "En garde!" "Oh, crap," thought Monson as he started to move. He had not sensed this one. He was caught totally off guard. Reacting quickly, he ducked and rolled to his side and looked up in time to see a second boy quickly traverse the distance between them. Luckily for Monson, the new boy had apparently found his target as he attacked the larger guy. There was a flurry of movement, coupled with laughter as the onslaught commenced. Monson watched with riveted interest as the skirmish unfolded between the battling duo. The first boy, the one that had attacked Monson, was fending off some very fast blows from the latecomer. This new boy was quite a bit smaller than both Monson and the red-haired boy, but was lightning quick. Moving from pose to pose with rapid succession, his style, which seemed to change from time to time, appeared somewhat wild, but powerful and extraordinarily effective. The larger boy fought valiantly, but was slowly overpowered. Monson found that he was very excited watching the contest before him, which automatically caused him to look down at the stick in his hand. "Have I done this before?" he thought. His thoughts were interrupted. The large boy, still fending off attacks, whistled at him and gestured towards his right hand. Monson knew immediately what he was asking for and took aim, flicking the stick towards the scuffle. The larger boy, exhibiting some very fine agility, caught the stick blade down. New life entered him as he renewed his offense and took his attacker by surprise. Displaying a great deal of finesse, he started to counterattack with a double-blade fencing style. Notwithstanding this, Monson could tell the conclusion was pretty much inevitable. The smaller attacker was just too fast for his larger opponent. The duel concluded with a dramatic disarmament by the newcomer. With a few parries and thrusts, Monson saw the larger boy's sticks fly far overhead and hit the ground with a loud thud. "I got you, Arthur." The new boy landed the tip of the stick on the former's throat. "That's one for me. It appears you're in for a bad year." "Don't get cocky, Casey. First day of school, after all, and you were lucky. You caught me off guard." The new boy laughed and turning around he looked towards Monson. This boy also wore very nice, yet very casual clothing. Nice denim pants and a polo shirt made him look like he was getting ready to go out on a first date, but didn't know quite what to wear. For some reason, the style didn't suit him. His features were normal enough, with dirty blonde hair, a soft jawline, and smooth eyebrows. The most unique element had to be the boy's eyes. They seemed a bit large for his face, almost like his mom mated with a bat or something. Monson could tell that the boy came from money, just like the cute blonde girl. But in his defense, the effect of the expensive clothes was lost in the sweaty figure standing before him. He noticed the boy's hands, which were rough and calloused, like he grew up on a farm or construction site. The stick resting in his hand looked very much at home. The whole picture very much suited the newcomer. "So, who's the new guy?" The boy called Casey gestured towards Monson. He stared at Monson, narrowing his eyes. "Dude, and what happened to his face?" Monson breathed deeply. It was about time to make his exit. "No idea." Arthur also looked at Monson. "I actually attacked him, thinking it was you." "You attacked him, thinking it was me? Ha! How thick are you?" "Shut up, Casey."
"Better watch it, Arthur."
Casey swung the stick back in an arc and flourished it outrageously.
"I don't want to have to give you another thrashing."
"Oh, you think so, do you?" Arthur sounded like he was starting to get angry. "How about I crush that fat melon of yours right now?"
"Bring it on."
Casey also sounded riled up.
"I'll stomp the fool out of you."
Arthur made to answer when Monson finally chimed in.
Guys, calm down."
He moved towards the two and stood between them.
"We still have orientation to attend, and let's face it, it's way too early in the morning for a thrashing."
They both looked at him, surprise etched in their sweaty faces. Then they looked at each other, and suddenly burst into laughter. Monson smiled at them, not quite sure what to do. Then he opened his mouth to say something, but realized that he could not think of anything else to say, and shut it again. They all stood there in silence, the laughter finally dying out. He turned away from them, embarrassed, preparing to grab his stuff. But before he could move more than a few feet, a hand found his shoulder and whipped him back around.
"And where do you think you're going?"
Casey inspected Monson with a scrutinizing eye.
"Well, I was just,
Monson's reply died off as the other two boys looked steadily at him. After a moment, Monson fell into silence. The two boys just smiled.
"So this is the part where you tell us your name."
Casey extended the hand he had used to grab Monson. He did not sound angry at all. Was there sudden anger in act? Monson replayed the events quickly in his head. He had to admit, he was starting to feel kind of stupid.
Monson."
Monson smiled and shook the outstretched hand.
"Monson Grey. And you are?" "Dude, Cassius K. But you can call me Casey. Everyone does."
Casey gestured to the larger boy, who was not really paying attention to their exchange, but rather gazing at a group of girls several cars down. He had a very comical look on his face as he was eyeing one of the girls with longing.
"The brute ogling the ladies is Arthur Payne.
Casey was cut short when Arthur suddenly turned around, looking angry.
"How many times do I have to tell you not to call me Arthur?"
"Seriously, I told you there's no way I'm calling you that ridiculous name. I can't say it without laughing. That's how dumb a name it is."
"It's based on Artorius Castus."
Arthur drew a smug look on his face.
"As in, King Arthur? How's that a dumb name?"
Casey moaned, covering his eyes with his hand.
"Arthur, how many times are we going to have this conversation? Artorius Castus doesn't exist, just as King Arthur doesn't exist. They weren't the same person because neither of them were real people. Besides, why would you change it to Artorius? Even if he was real, it's still a stupid name."
"And I've already told you, Cassius."
Artorius tried to make Casey's name sound like an insult.
"If Artorius wasn't real, Then where did they get the round table, huh?
He said it with total conviction. Dude, did you really just ask me that? I hate to interject, said Monson before they got back into the swing of their argument. But why Artorius? I mean, what's wrong with Arthur? I think it's a nice name. Why change it? Arthur sighed so deeply and with such melancholy that Monson had to wonder if he was serious. He continued to look regretful.
Do you know how many times I've been called Weasley in my life?
Monson looked at Casey, a smile on his face, his lips parted. Casey, however, preempted him. Dude, if you mention that book, I swear I'm going to punch you. I look nothing like that Potter kid. I was just wondering if you had considered changing your name to, I don't know, Dudley? I think it suits you. Oh, dude, you are so going to get it. Monson laughed, but Casey was not done yet. Okay, change of topic. What happened to your face, bro? It looks like your mother mated with a blender.
Casey, you can't say things like that.
Wait, what are you talking about? You asked if I got into a fight with a meat grinder. How is that any better?
Is that bad? I thought it was rather manly.
Only you would think that was manly. Wow, of all the tactless people, Monson thought, these two take the cake. Oddly enough, there was something refreshing about them. Casey looked at Monson, obviously wanting him to answer. Monson smiled. He liked these two already. Don't be jealous of my dashing good looks. Bruh, don't worry about that. Monson, the retort on the tip of his tongue, was suddenly cut short by a call he recognized as Molly's. He totally forgot they had somewhere to be. Gathering himself, he turned back towards the boys. Hey, we'd better get moving. We don't want them to start without us. Hang on. Casey started to move away. I'll get my stuff and meet you guys at the central passage. You'd better go too, Arthur. I expect your mommy is waiting for you.
Bite me.
Arthur growled, hurrying away. Casey laughed and cantered back out of sight. Monson collected his belongings, including the two mock weapons that lay forgotten on the ground. He'd have to return Arthur's once they met up again. Once situated, he started to move towards Molly, who was standing not far away, beckoning him towards her. Are you ready? She was eyeing him expectantly. He nodded, but did not say anything. She grabbed one of his bags and started towards the far corner of the parking lot. They walked briskly, speaking lightly about where Molly had gone. Monson was not that interested. He was still thinking about the two boys he had just met, but it gave them something to discuss in the meantime. Eventually, they fell in behind a large group of parents and students who were walking and talking quietly about something. There was a hint of conspiracy in their voices. He's here? What do you mean, he's here? A tall blonde woman was speaking to what appeared to be her husband. Isn't he supposed to be locked up somewhere? I heard he's a criminal.
Those are all rumors. Actually, from what I heard, they don't really know where he's been. Just that he disappeared suddenly, and now he's back. They weren't even sure if he was going to redeem.
The man leaned into his wife.
To think the new Horumvir is someone like that, when the diamond is still attending. Preposterous.
Diamond? Like, as in the stone? Monson thought, as a feeling of déjà vu assaulted him. This was something he should know. He could feel it. The words were familiar, very familiar. He had heard them before. Monson thought back to their entrance into the guest parking lot. No, that couldn't be right, he thought. His curiosity sparked. He turned towards Molly and whispered, not wanting to be overheard by the couple in front of him. Hey, Molly, what's a Horumvir? It sounds familiar. Molly smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Not a what, Monson, but a who. Monson, confused, looked at Molly, his gaze unwavering, waiting for her to explain. When she did not say anything, he prodded her. Molly, Do you know something that you aren't telling me? Monson, honey, this isn't the time. You know I can't walk and talk at the same time. I get all tongue-twisted. Molly, we're standing still. Well, how about that? Molly Allison Penmatale? Monson was starting to get frustrated. Spit it out. What aren't you telling me? Monson, dear? Her tone suddenly switched from happy to resigned, even weary. Oh, there is something, but I don't know if I'm going to tell you quite yet. He glared at her, trying to show his discontentment. She did not falter under his gaze, but stood firmly, holding his eye contact. It appeared that she was trying to hold back a smile. You're making fun of me. His eyes narrowed. Please tell me, what's the deal? Oh, all right. She choked back a laugh. It's not like I wanted to hide anything from you. I was just... She was interrupted when Artorius and Casey nudged into them. Hey, hey! Casey pulled in behind Monson. This caused Molly to stop talking very quickly. Then, as if she could find nothing else more interesting, she asked about the two boys that just arrived. Monson, honey, who are your friends? Oh, well, you see... Monson was about to try and explain all at once that they were not really his friends, but rather the big kid had attacked him thinking he was the short, wiry one. But before he could answer, Casey made a florid bow. Cassius K. 'Tis a pleasure. Dude. Artorius shoved Casey slightly. What the hell are you bowing for? Nobody does that. Casey glared at him, then cracked a smile when he and Artorius made eye contact. Artorius glared back, but ended up grinning in the end. He took the opportunity to make his introduction. Artorius Payne. Artorius held out a hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. Molly eyed them both for a second. Molly Penmatale. Then, without warning, she bowed. Casey broke into a fit of laughter. Artorius turned a bright red. Molly and Monson joined in the laughter, as did Artorius, eventually. They continued to laugh as they moved from the parking lot to a highly ornate hallway. They came to a sharp split, separating into two paths that led off in different directions. The hall looked like it belonged to an old Roman church. The colors brought images of huge, coffered ceilings and green-speckled, overlarge columns to Monson's mind. Why he had this particular impression, he did not exactly know, but it flowed in his mind just the same. Not knowing why was an ongoing feeling for him, so he did his best to ignore it. As they moved along the hallway, Monson saw different groups of older kids greet each other in a variety of ways, from high fives to kisses. Individual girls grouped together as they seemed to be magnetically drawn to one another. He watched as they laughed and whispered, eyeing boys expectantly. Large groups of boys were scattered here and there in obvious cliques. Jocks, geeks, and bandies were all flocking to their respective leaders. He had never been around this many people before. Growing up in a very small town tends to have that effect. Many of the older students took the right fork of the hall, heading towards what he could only assume was the dormitories, while the rest of the students steered to the left fork. He wondered where he and his new, dare he call them, friends, were going. Casey was talking sports with Artorius and Molly. They seemed to be disagreeing over something. You're senile. I don't care how good we are. There's no way. Arthur, you gotta have faith, bro. Casey slapped him on the back. Once they see us play, they won't be able to keep us off the field. Casey, all joking aside, you have to be realistic. He looked very grim, as if what he was saying was costing him a lot of effort. There's no way that you and I are going to get on the top team, never mind actually playing. They have never had a freshman play varsity at Collin University. Never. You know, Molly smiled and placed a hand on Monson. Monson is automatically on the team. Wait, what? What am I automatically on? The Legion. Thanks, Molly. And what's the Legion? Casey was the one who answered.
Dude, the Corn University football team.
How did you do that?
I have no idea.
Monson looked inquiringly at Molly. She merely smiled, but said nothing. Casey and Artorius were both looking at Monson with something close to reverence. He felt his face turning bright red. He quickly started examining the courtyard and buildings that were now in front of them. He tried to avoid Casey and Artorius' gaze as much as possible.
All right, bro.
Casey broke the silence.
I gotta ask, man. How did you pull...
He was cut off when Molly placed a hand on his shoulder. It was very apparent that she did not want him asking any questions. The courtyard of Corn University looked like it belonged in a brochure for ancient Rome. A small rock wall about 3 feet tall completely enclosed the yard and a walkway that ran parallel to it. The walkway zigzagged between large oaks and willows, creating the impression that the students were on some sort of nature walk instead of getting ready to enter a school. The lawns were lush and well kept, with an odd sort of grass that was both very short and very soft. There was also an abundance of gardens with all kinds of flowers and shrubs, many of which were on the tail end of blooming. A ways off in the distance, Monson saw the older students moving towards a very large building that appeared to be on the other side of campus. The group in front of him, what Monson could only assume was new students, continued down the largest of the rock-lined paths, looking nervous but excited. They walked for what seemed like a very long time, owing partly because of the sheer size of the campus and partly due to the nervous atmosphere causing the feeling to intensify, making it feel longer than it really was. As they traveled further in, the students saw many buildings scattered around the grounds with no clear plan as to their tactical layout. Monson saw the names of each building posted on large stone plaques placed methodically in front of each edifice. The plaques were inscribed with names like Caesar's Hall and Home of the 5 Good Emperors. Casey and Artorius seemed to be enjoying the grandeur of Corn University just as much as he was. In the short time he had known the two boys, this was the most quiet he had heard them. The 3 boys and Molly followed the other new students, who collectively seemed to know where they were going, until they came to the doors of a single massive building. It resembled a mix between modern architecture and the old Roman Colosseum. The transition was smooth but deliberate, the characteristics of both styles at times coming together to create something very distinct from the individual contributions. Again, his absent memory notwithstanding, he knew that he liked this building.
Didn't hold anything back, did they?
Kind of intimidating, isn't it? Molly was the one who answered. I think that's the point. All 3 boys looked at her, bewildered. Think about it. Her eyes were glued on the building. Discipline, competition, and hard work are all elements of the school code. She finally looked at the boys. Monson could have sworn that he saw bitterness on her face. And what better way to get students to fall into line than intimidation? The 3 of them all looked at her, each with confusion etched on their faces. Molly seemed to notice this confusion. Oh, use your brains, boys. What better way to get you guys to do what you are instructed than to scare it into you? But why focus on intimidation? I mean, it's a private school, right? Obviously we want to be here, or we wouldn't have come. Molly's tone had surprised him. She never displayed anything close to this before. He was at a loss to describe it. Pain? Perhaps. He was not quite sure. Intimidation is the most effective means to force you into conformity. I just have a problem with things like that. Brings back very bad memories. Monson was now looking at Molly as though he was seeing her for the first time. He felt her words and wanted to know where they came from, but before he could ask about her comment, the massive doors of the modern Colosseum opened, effectively silencing the parents and students in the crowd. A man walked towards them, a slight skip in his step. He was middle-aged, probably no more than 40, with short, dark hair and a touch of gray, and a very experienced look about him. He wore a crisp, dark suit that for some reason did not suit him very well. He walked with confidence and dignity, and wore a ripe smile across his face. The man covered the distance to the new students very quickly, though probably not quick enough for the anxious crowd. He stopped in front of the nervous group. "Welcome." The man gave some of the closer students a little wink. "I am Monson Grey. I am a teacher here at Collin and your guide for the evening." He bowed slightly to all of them. "I am here to take you the rest of the way, and please, do not worry." He looked at a girl at the front of the pack. "You will make it through this." The girl turned bright red and scooted behind her mother, something that she probably had not done since grade school. Her actions caused her to burn even redder as she realized what she was doing and that people were starting to laugh. The man's eyes scanned the crowd, smiling, and lingered for a fraction of a second on Molly, but when Monson looked inquiringly at her, he saw no signs of recognition. Maybe he had imagined it. "Parents, you will take the first right upon entering the Colosseum. Proceed up to the second balcony and take your seats there. You will be allowed to meet up with your students after the orientation." Monson looked around at this announcement. Parents were looking shocked and annoyed, while most of the other students were looking disheartened. The little murmuring that had been rolling through the crowd subsided, and things were now distinctly quiet. Monson Grey, apparently recognizing and correctly interpreting the looks of incredulity now looming out of the crowd, smiled even wider. "It is tradition. The dean prefers to talk to the students unaccompanied. He feels that this is a good time to begin the separation process." "Separation process?" Casey raised an eyebrow. "What the hell does that mean?" Both Artorius and Monson shook their heads. Then all three of the boys looked at Molly. She merely smiled, despite that same slightly bitter glint in her eye. "Speaking of separation, where are your guys' parents?" This question received two very different reactions.
My mom had a jet. She wanted to be here, but she's a designer. She has a show in Paris the day after tomorrow.
"Yeah, well, my guardians didn't make it today. Work, you know." "Now, if there are no more questions, all the new students will please follow me." Monson, Artorius, and Casey picked up their stuff and started to move, following the vast wave of students in front of them. They proceeded down another, highly ornate hall, which led them to the heart of the Colosseum. Monson looked around the halls, wanting to take in the whole picture. In fact, he was so caught up in the beauty of the passage, he did not notice that all of the parents and family were no longer with them. He took a deep, steadying breath, and all of a sudden felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Artorius. The big guy smiled at him.
"You're not alone, my man."
Monson did not say anything, but turned and gave Artorius a pat on the back. The students followed Monson Grey down a series of hallways until they came to another set of double doors labeled the inner chambers. Somehow the door opened from the inside as the group got close to it. As they entered, there was a collective gasp that reverberated through the crowd of students. The inner chambers were magnificent. They did not resemble chambers at all. They were like an indoor auditorium, making a decent attempt at posing like an outdoor one. Monson remembered a Discovery Channel special on outdoor auditoriums. The floor plan of this Colosseum seemed to be taken directly from that episode. The room was circular and symmetrical, with a large raised stage right in the center. The seating was boxed and placed in even intervals on raised platforms that descended and flowed down to the stage. Coming through the archway was awkward, however, as the ceiling right above them seemed to bulge, as if it had just completed a meal. Monson moved a few steps further. Large silk banners bathed in crimson, with the Collin University crest traced in gold filigree, were draped around the very spacious room, giving an earthly yet refined feel to the decor. The banisters, seats, and railways were built with beautifully carved wood, deeply stained and polished. Elaborate carvings of different scenes of nature wound their way around the wood. Lights were inlaid along the path, almost like a movie theater, though it seemed a little out of place here. The room was attractive for the most part, but a bit on the intimidating side. At the center of the stage was a large podium with a middle-aged man standing behind it. He was a handsome man, with perfectly styled brown hair, firm brown eyes, high cheekbones, and very white teeth. He looked like a news person, just a little too crisp to be real. He held himself with confidence, almost arrogance, looking at the students imperiously as they were herded towards their seats. Monson recognized the man, but could not remember from where. Another one of those impressions that he was still getting used to. There were a few other people sitting rigidly behind the man, flanking him on either side. Now that they were in the room proper, Monson could see that the low bulging ceiling that felt so out of place upon their entrance was due to a series of elevated box seats and balconies. It made him wonder why they needed so much seating. There could not be enough students to fill this place. Where were all the people coming from? The students moved slowly towards the front and took seats adjacent to the stage. Monson, Casey, and Artorius made their way down to the third aisle from the front and parked themselves next to a large, frumpy-looking boy who smelled of cabbage. Monson realized this boy had actually been sitting there before anyone else even entered the room. The boy turned from the friend he had been talking to and looked to see who was sitting next to him. His eyes fell upon Artorius, Casey, then Monson. He saw Monson, staring openly at his face, and looked like he wanted to say something. After a moment, it was as if a light suddenly went on in the boy's head, like he recognized someone. Quite suddenly, the boy turned back to his friend and spoke rapidly in an excited, hushed voice. "Hey, something really weird's going on." Monson leaned toward Casey. "It has something to do with this Horum Veer thing. I just know it." He looked at Casey inquisitively. "Do you have any idea what the Horum Veer is?" "Well, of course I know what it is. But what does that have to do with... Wait. Oh, I see." He faded off, a slightly glazed look in his eyes. Monson just stared at him, not really understanding what he was talking about. Casey obviously understood something that he did not, so Monson waited. All at once, as if a floodgate suddenly opened, Casey started talking very fast and excitedly. "Whoa, but wait, how could that have happened? I mean, the whole thing's fixed, everyone knows that." "What are you talking about?" "The Horum Veer, bro. That's the only way you could have made it on the Legion without trying out and as a freshman." "What is a Horum Veer?" Monson felt completely frustrated. "Not what, dude. Who?" "Okay, fine. Who is the Horum Veer?" Monson somehow already knew the answer. Casey placed his hand on Monson's shoulder. "You are, bro." You've been listening to the podcast-only novel of The House of Grey by Collin Earl. For more news, information, and updates, please visit houseofgreybook.com. Music by Figure of Fiends. Visit the band at myspace.com/Figure of Fiends. Cover art for The House of Grey provided by James Thane. More information at thayn.net.